coronavirus crisis, an update on the fight against COVID-19, and the effort to send relief to Americans affected by the pandemic. Accepting a mandate, new developments in the attempts to form a government in Italy. Reaching out, why a Catholic radio network opened a station in Iraq. And reason to celebrate, what Pope Francis says about one benefit from attending Mass. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. President Joe Biden says that he is not budging, and he insists that Americans should each get $1,400 stimulus payments. It's part of his push for Congress to approve more aid money, and the president's White House COVID-19 response team offers a warning to football fans: punt on big Super Bowl celebrations so they don't become COVID-19 super spreader events. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. A very busy day here at the White House. Now, earlier I asked White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki if President Joe Biden will at all reach out to pro-life Americans considering some of his recent pro-abortion executive orders. You'll hear more on that exchange in a moment. First, President Biden wants the American Rescue Plan to get done.
President Joe Biden met Democratic senators to talk dollars, $1.9 trillion of them. The president says his proposed $1,400 direct payments to Americans is a must-have.
We'll get Republican support.
To the extent we can work with our Republican colleagues, let's do that. At the end of the day, if we can't, then that's fine.
And as Americans wait to see how much economic stimulus is coming their way, the COVID-19 response team says coronavirus cases remain extraordinarily high. But Dr. Rochelle Walensky said the coming days could bring less death.
And the recent decline in hospitalizations gives us hope that the number of deaths should start to decrease in the coming weeks.
As for schools reopening their doors during the pandemic, some teachers' unions are balking at heading back to the classroom before getting their COVID-19 vaccinations.
I would also say that safe reopening of schools is not, that vaccination of teachers is not a prerequisite for safe reopening of schools.
And with the Super Bowl coming this Sunday, the panel says don't turn it into a super spreader.
Whichever team you're rooting for and whichever commercial is your favorite, please watch the Super Bowl safely, gathering only virtually or with the people you live with.
Also today, as I mentioned at the top, earlier I asked Press Secretary Jen Psaki a pro-life related question. Here's how that exchange went.
President Biden has stated he wants to unite the country. In the first 2 weeks he's been in office, however, and much to the great disappointment of pro-life Americans, he has revoked the Mexico City policy. He has ordered a review of Title X and issued a statement strongly supporting Roe v. Wade. Is the president going to make any effort to reach out to pro-life Americans in his administration?
Well, those have long been the president's positions, and he certainly was just restating them and delivering on promises he made on the campaign trail. But the president will reach out to all Americans, and that is how he's going to govern, what he talked about in his inaugural address, and he has every intention of delivering on that promise.
If I may follow up on that, will he, you described him as a devout Catholic, will he use his faith to guide him in any policy decision making?
He does attend church nearly every weekend, and that's something that's important to him personally and to his family. And he's talked about the impact of his faith on healing and everything he's been through as a human being. So certainly it's a guide to him as a human being.
Now, I also asked the press secretary if President Biden would be open to considering mandatory year-round schooling or full-time summer school to get kids caught up, kids who've been left behind in the pandemic. She said she has not yet spoken to the president about that matter. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, this morning, one of Joe Biden's former rivals for the presidency, Pete Buttigieg, was sworn in as Secretary of Transportation. Others on President Biden's list of cabinet nominees are moving fairly swiftly through the confirmation process, this despite objections from some GOP senators.
The yeas are 56, the nays are 43. The nomination is confirmed.
Yesterday afternoon, with the support of just 6 Republicans, Alejandro Mayorkas was confirmed as Homeland Security Secretary. GOP Senator Josh Hawley joined 42 of his colleagues in voting no. The senator from Missouri has voted against all of President Biden's nominees so far. Writing last month, Mr. Mayorkas has not adequately explained how he will enforce federal law and secure the southern border, given President-elect Biden's promise to roll back major enforcement and security measures. Democrats argue they hold the reins of power, especially with a new organizational agreement the two party leaders reached, and Democrats want the president's nominees to get to work.
Senate Democrats are not going to waste any time taking on the biggest challenges facing our country and our planet.
But Republicans say their Democratic colleagues need to keep them at the table and hear them out.
The new president talks a lot about unity, but his White House staff and congressional leadership are working with a different playbook.
In testimony this morning, Miguel Cardona, President Biden's nominee for Education Secretary, promised, if confirmed, he will reopen schools closed due to the pandemic.
If we really want to recover, we really need to invest now, or we're going to pay later.
On this issue, Republicans agree.
We know with certainty now that K through 12 schooling cannot move online indefinitely.
Italy's newly appointed prime minister has accepted a mandate to form a government.
Ringrazio il Presidente della Repubblica per la fiducia che mi ha voluto accordare.
Mario Draghi has agreed to organize a non-political party to steer the country through the coronavirus pandemic. The new prime minister is a former European Central Bank chief. He replaces Giuseppe Conte, who stepped down last week after his coalition collapsed. Officials in Japan say they are monitoring a threat from China.
今月1日には中国海警法が施行されており
Japan's Minister for Foreign Affairs says the country is keeping an eye on a new maritime law from Beijing. The measure, passed last month, empowers China's Coast Guard to take all necessary measures, including the use of weapons, to protect its sovereign rights. Hundreds of lawmakers in Myanmar, also known as Burma, detained since the military coup earlier this week, have been told to leave the capital city within 24 hours. Video shows lines of cars leaving a heavily guarded compound in the country. The former leader remains detained until at least the middle of the month. She has been charged with being in possession of illegally imported walkie-talkies. On Monday, the military announced that it will take power for 1 year. The coup in the Southeast Asian country has heightened concerns about the safety of the country's remaining Rohingya Muslims and other religious communities now that the military is in control. Nadine Maenza, commissioner with the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, joins me now on Skype to talk more about the situation in Myanmar, also known as Burma. Nadine, welcome. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. First off, for those who may not be familiar, can you quickly tell us about the Rohingyas in Myanmar and why they've been persecuted?
Sure. So in August of 2017, the Burmese military perpetrated a genocide against them. They came in the middle of the night throughout the Rohingya village in the Rakhine state, and they attacked houses, families, killed many, almost every woman and girl that were raped, burned down homes, raised them, sometimes with family members, sick or elderly, still inside, desecrated and destroyed mosques. And I even heard of reports of babies being taken from their mothers and being thrown into the fire. So this had been a leading up to these atrocities against the Rohingya Muslims who had been lost their citizenship and then were discriminated against. And you could see this path towards this genocide occur, and over 700,000 of them fled within just a few days to Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, where there are now over 1 million in refugee camps. I was able to visit with them in 2019, and I heard how almost everyone I had met had lost somebody those few days as the military attacked them.
What else did people tell you when you were there?
You know, they told me they wanted citizenship. They wanted they would only go back if they had the right to be treated equally, if they had the right to have their land back. All the land houses were raised so that it's hard to even find the differences between people's property, that they wanted to be safe. The people several 100,000 Rohingyas that have remained in Rakhine are almost all in camps that are almost like prisons. They don't have any freedom of movement. And, another important thing to remember about what's going on in Burma is the Christians are also in danger. The Burmese military has been attacking the Christians in the Karen state and the Kachin state. In fact, today I spoke to friends in the Karen state who even as we were talking could hear bombs going off around them as the military attacked these Christian villages. And they do have a ceasefire with the military, so the military would deny that this was happening, but there are plenty of reports of violence against Christians as well.
Nadine, prior to the coup, what were the conditions like there for the Rohingya under the leadership of Aung San Suu Kyi? Was there any improvement for them?
No, in fact, in 2011, after 60 years of military rule, the military entered a power sharing agreement with the civilian government. And in 2015, former political prisoner and Nobel Peace Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi became the civilian leader. The world would rejoice, and we're very disappointed that she refused to stand up for religious freedom or human rights at all. She never denounced the violence against the Rohingyas or the Christians. And in fact, a lot of the things she said probably helped to make her more popular with the Buddhist majority, particularly the extremist country, and a lot of hate speech. A lot of Facebook there is like the internet. So there has been a continuing decline of tolerance in the whole country. And so it's become more and more problematic for religious minorities because of this culture. And a lot of people have said that, she couldn't stand up because the military might take over if she did, but we can see now the military has done that, even though she never did end up speaking up for the minorities there. But I might add, although we're disappointed in her not being the leader that we'd hoped she would be, she was elected legally by the people of Myanmar, and this coup is a terrible development for the country, and the chance of democracy, if they continue this, will be over. It's important that the international community stand up and that there's a consequence for what the military has just done.
Well, Nadine, thank you so much for coming on today and for your analysis. We really appreciate it. We appreciate what you do, too. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, an update on a pro-life measure in Montana. And researchers in the UK reveal new information on a COVID-19 vaccine. Lawmakers in Kansas have passed a measure that, if approved by voters, would amend the state constitution to exclude the right to an abortion. The Value Them Both amendment also would reserve the right to regulate abortion in the state legislature. The proposal would be voted on during a primary election in August 2022. And in Montana, the House Judiciary Committee there has advanced a bill that would ban the coverage of abortion procedures by health insurance plans offered through the state exchange. Joining me now on Skype to talk more about the bill and its significance is Matthew Brower, Executive Director of the Montana Catholic Conference. Matthew, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on today. We appreciate it. Matthew, specifically, what will this bill do and why is it so important?
Well, this bill is important because what it's going to seek to do is ban coverage for elective abortions in those health insurance plans that are offered on our exchange. So that's following the lead of about 26 other states that to varying degrees have done the same thing. And so with really narrow exceptions, this is going to prevent coverage for abortion in those plans offered on our exchange.
And I understand that this bill is similar to one that was passed back in 2011. However, that one was vetoed by the Democratic governor at the time. What happens next to this current measure? And is there any indication how the current governor, who is a Republican, may be leaning?
Well, it was actually just voted on within the last half hour, and it was debated on our House floor. It passed on what we call second reading, 66-34 today. It'll be voted again on the House floor tomorrow. If it passes there, it'll move on to the Senate, where we think the chances are very good that it'll pass the Senate, make it on to the governor's desk. And while he hasn't specifically discussed this piece of legislation, we're fairly confident that he's going to sign it. And this will be a real victory for pro-life advocates in Montana as a way of protecting our conscience. So we think this is a very important and good piece of legislation.
Absolutely. So encouraging. What other pro-life legislation is being considered there in Montana?
Sure. We've got a number of pro-life bills actually working our way through the legislature this session. 4 of them up for hearing this week alone related to the issue of abortion. We've got a pain-capable bill banning abortions at the point that an unborn child can feel pain. We've got a Born Alive Protection Act that'll be heard this week. We've got a bill addressing the risks involved with chemical abortions. But perhaps I think the most exciting piece of legislation related to beginning of life issues is a bill surrounding ultrasounds. And it will require, if it passes and ends up signed into law, it'll require abortion providers to simply offer pregnant women the opportunity to view an ultrasound and listen to a fetal heart tone. We think this is common sense legislation. It's really going to make a difference in the lives of not only those unborn children, but those mothers who instead choose life. So we're excited about that piece of legislation, along with some things addressing the death penalty.
Well, Matthew, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all that with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Again, Matthew Brower, Executive Director of the Montana Catholic Conference.
Thank you for having me.
Government officials in Denmark say they will work to develop a digital passport to show whether people have received a coronavirus vaccine. The document would be a joint effort between the government and businesses. The passport could be ready in the next 3 or 4 months. They are hoping the initiative will lead to the reopening of Danish society. It's unclear if it will be used for any purposes other than travel. A new study in the UK suggests a single dose of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine offers a high level of protection for 12 weeks.
We show that in those 3 months from when the first dose is given, and of course that's where many people are at the moment, they're in that period. Once the immune response has kicked in, which takes 2 to 3 weeks, there is sustained protection right up until the point the second dose is given.
Dr. Andrew Pollard of the Oxford Vaccine Group says the findings also show an increase in the effectiveness of the second dose. Britain has implemented a 3-month delay between doses so that as many people as possible can receive the first treatment. Up next, we hear about an effort to help the faithful in Iraq. A Catholic radio network recently opened a new studio in Erbil, Iraq, 1 month before Pope Francis's scheduled trip to the country. Radio Maria is a nonprofit Catholic radio network. It has stations in 77 countries across 5 continents. Joining us now is Joseph Nasser, coordinator of the Asia, Oceania and Middle East section at Radio Maria, and he joins us now from the headquarters in Erbil, Italy. Joseph, thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate it. So tell us, why did you want to start a radio station in Iraq, and tell us about that process?
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you. Well, it was a beautiful adventure because at the beginning, we, in 2015, in a special audience with the Holy Father, Pope Francis, we offered him a gift, that is to build a Radio Maria in Arabic for the whole Middle East, especially in that special occasion and that special moment of suffering and war in the Middle East. So we began a radio program to all the in Arabic to all the Middle East people, and we sent many mobile studios to broadcast, to receive, to share the prayers from all over the Arabic countries, especially Iraq, where Patriarch Sacco and Bishop Guarda and all the local community wanted a special radio also for them. So this is how the radio began in Erbil, in Iraq.
And Joseph, I understand that your programming caters to both Catholics and Orthodox. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely. Radio Maria is a Christian voice from all the Christians communities, especially those who have do love Christ and who have such a patrimony, such a history. So in the Middle East, where there are many rites, and they are many similar, especially that we know that the Oriental Catholics, most of them are Unionists, and they came back to Rome after the Orthodox Schisma. So they have the same rite, the same liturgy. So there is no difference really between many rites in Orthodox and Christian prayers. So we are open to all the population, to all the Christians. It is really the body of Christ. And even though Radio Maria is Catholic as a radio, doctrine, etc., but the liturgy of the Orthodox is very live, very heartful, and welcome to all the Christians. It is from the all people, and so we go to the parishes, Orthodox or Catholics, we broadcast from them, and we broadcast to them.
And Joseph, we don't have a lot of time left, but I'm curious, what are you hearing from the Iraqi people as we near the Pope's scheduled trip there next month?
Oh, they are looking forward to receiving him as a spiritual guide, as a person that really do care about them, especially that they were forgotten by most of the countries in the world. He is the one who is seeking their own sake and not the economic interest. And they were looking forward for that for many years now. They see in the Holy Father their own spiritual guide, their own direction to the right thing, and they are looking forward to seeing him, especially that after their martyrdom, especially their the suffering. So they are looking forward as one who believe in their faith, who believe that they have to stay there to continue like a friend who is visiting them in their home.
Well, thank you so much, Joseph, for your time today. We appreciate it. Joseph Nasser, coordinator of the Asia, Oceania, and Middle East section at Radio Maria. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy.
And finally tonight, Pope Francis says you don't go to Mass to listen, you go to celebrate.
La preghiera del cristiano fa propria la presenza sacramentale di Gesù.
At his weekly talk in the Vatican, the Holy Father says the liturgy, whether it be Mass, a baptism, or confession, is an encounter with Christ. It is a living prayer that invites God's grace into our hearts and transforms our lives into worship. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.